Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Telegraph Herald More Than the Score, presented by Dubuque Auto Plaza. I am sports editor Jim Leitner, joined by sports reporter Brenden West. Steve Ortman, your usual host, is off this weekend for good behavior. This week we're going to talk about boys basketball and the Telegraph Herald AllArea basketball team with Brenden, who completed that package this weekend. Brenden, let's start with the Player of the Year. We have obviously a very talented young man who earned Player of the Year this year. Tell me about Noah Carter.
Well, I think anybody who watched basketball in this area can agree that seeing what Noah Carter was able to do this season as just a sophomore was pretty incredible. He was one of the top scorers in the conference. This after primarily playing mostly a bench role last season. He scored 18.5 points per game, and of anybody who shot more than 230 shot attempts this season, he had the highest shooting percentage, a whopping 62.9%, which was absolutely phenomenal. He beat out a lot of good players for this Player of the Year now, but I feel, just watching this kid play, watching what he was able to do and seeing the growth and what he was able to do on a basketball court, he becomes our youngest Player of the Year ever since we started the award in 1997. So all I can say is, it was a phenomenal season for him and, well-deserved.
Senior was a team that was ranked in the top 5 pretty much all season long, with a pretty nice balanced roster too. Tell me about what he meant to that team. Why was he so pivotal, and why was he so important to the Dubuque Senior success this season?
Well, Senior, I think had its eyes on a lot of, they clearly had their eyes on state. They finished with 19 wins, only 4 losses, and you could just tell right from the beginning of the season that this was a team that had matured. They were pretty young last year. They come into this year. They returned a lot of that experience, a lot of the key guys from their state tournament run last year. But then right there in the middle, they lose their one returning all-conference player, Carter Stevens. They lost him for close to a month there in January with a foot injury. That's a pretty big loss for most teams. But Noah Carter, basically stepped up his play from there. He kind of put the team on his back, and there were a lot of games in there where he really just kind of took over. One that kind of sticks out, granted it was one of Senior's few losses this year, but one that sticks out is when he dropped 33 points against Iowa City West. Iowa City West, of course, won the state championship this year, and nobody scored as much as Noah Carter did against them. All that said, I mean, they finish off with a Mississippi Valley Conference outright championship in the regular season. They didn't wind up at state, got ousted by Hempstead there, but that should show you at least a little bit of a taste of what Noah was able to bring to this team. They didn't really skip a beat despite losing one of their starters, and they were definitely a highly efficient team when they were at 100%, especially because of Noah.
Speaking of Hempstead, Kurt Deutsch is our Telegraph Herald Coach of the Year after leading the Mustangs to their first ever trip to the state tournament. Hempstead's a school that opened in 1969, and they were one of the very few Class 4A schools that had never been to the state tournament before. Ankeny Centennial is the only other one, and they've only been open for a few years.
Yeah.
So it speaks a lot to Hempstead and their breakthrough season. He's our Coach of the Year. Tell me about what he did this year, how he guided this team this year to enable him to be our Coach of the Year.
Well, one of the things that a few things kind of struck me. Okay, there were a lot of great coaches in the area. A lot of teams had really great seasons. I think we had 5 teams finish top 8 on Illinois, Wisconsin, and the Iowa side of the river here. But what really sticks out to me about what happened with Deutsch this year, he led his team his team won 18 games this year, which is the most he's had as a coach since he took over in 2008. Well, kind of like Senior, returning a lot of the guys that they sort of relied on the year before. A lot of chemistry there already, but the big difference I think was they took a 2016 sub-state loss to Senior, and he used that as sort of motivation and sort of the things he talked about were instilling belief in his players and giving them confidence that they could finally overcome sort of that hurdle that's been dogging them for years and years and years. And it was just ultimate sweetness for Hempstead when they were finally able to break through, sort of getting a little bit of redemption there by beating Senior in that sub-state final game. And the community outpour has just been overwhelming for Hempstead. It's been such a great benchmark for the Mustangs to finally be able to crack through, and the guy that really guided them there, granted another deep balanced team, but it's hard for me to see. You definitely see Deutsch's stamp on this season for sure.
What I really liked about that team was, as you mentioned, there was so much balance. You didn't have one guy who was dominating the scoring or anything like that. You had basically 5, 6, 7 guys who could drop 15, 16 points in a game and lead your team to victory. Talk a little bit about that balance and how key that was, making it to a state tournament instead of relying on one player.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was balance on both ends of the floor, too. Hempstead wound up being one of the best defensive teams in the whole entire state for Class 4A, which is a pretty remarkable thing. They were second only to one other team in steals. So they played really great team defense, and I think Coach Deutsch talked to me about this a little bit. A lot of it comes down to instilling that belief in your players, whether he's your main guy at the top or maybe that 6th, 7th man down at the bottom of the bench. You gotta be able to place confidence and place trust in that guy that, yes, you can go out there and be the guy that carries the load for us tonight. And I think what ultimately really showed was right there at the end. Granted, Hempstead lost the state tournament quarterfinal game, but their leading scorer was their 7th man off the bench, Curtis Martin III. And I mean, all these players have so much confidence, and it's no surprise that, with that balance, with that defensive strategy that they were able to finally crack through this year. I also was able to catch up with Kurt Deutsch for our interview for the Coach of the Year, and here's some things he had to say about it.
I'd say just the togetherness of our team, just how genuine they were about each other, about how focused they were day in and day out, making sure that they're a better version of themselves, the next practice and the next game, and, their hard work and dedication and togetherness paid off by going to the state tournament.
Yeah. What do you think it means for this program? Obviously, it's a proud basketball program. To be able to finally break through and accomplish that state championship, what does that mean for the Hempstead Society?
We've been pretty good the last 4 years, and this was kind of the next step. And these guys have been talking about it since they first came into our basketball program. 3 or 4 years ago of going to the state tournament, and those are pretty lofty goals. Only 8 teams get to do that every year, and these guys were able to go ahead and do that, and just kind of took Hempstead basketball to a place it's never been before, which is something no one will ever be able to take away from them. So that trophy case isn't getting rid of that trophy, anytime soon. So it's a really special accomplishment for this group of guys.
Last one, just when you think about the sweetest moments of this season, what sort of sticks out for you?
Just the friendships that these guys have developed, just the off the floor, hanging out and friendships, the smiles and the genuine relationships that have been built, but then also the excitement and the emotions that came pouring out when they made the state tournament. After we beat Senior in the sub-state final, those emotions were pure and they're genuine, and they're very special. So just those 2 things are definitely going to stick with me, for the rest of my life when it comes to these guys.
Okay, so that takes care of our Player of the Year and our Coach of the Year. Brenden, there's still 5 guys that are going to make the floor for our first team All-Area. Tell me about those players. Tell me about the guys that made the first team All-Area basketball this year.
Well, I got to say, balance is the name of the game this year in the Tri-States, and we'll just kind of start at the top here. Riley LeGrand, a senior for Dyersville Beckman, he goes down as the school's all-time leader in assists, led the team in points, led the team in several different categories. phenomenal all WAMAC season for him. Then we go over to the other side of the river in East Dubuque. Peyton Heller, leading scorer for the Warriors, who wound up cracking the super sectional for the first time this year. He averaged 14 points a game, but down the stretch, 17 points per game, which is obviously key to the Warriors' run this year. We've got Lucas Duax. Now, for Hempstead, really hard to pick one guy because they're so balanced, as we said. But Lucas really kind of put the team on his back when he needed. He goes down as a first-team All-MBC pick, led the team in steals, led the team in assists, three-pointers, and averaged 13 points a game. Then we go over to the Wisconsin side. We got Hunter Machi out of Shullsburg. Gets an all-state nod as the Miners crack through to the state championship game. And then, of course, there's Darlington's Will Schwartz, another point guard who, one of those do-everything guys for the Redbirds. He can score, he can rebound, he had assists, also an all-state nod there for him. So, the headline this week was Tri-State Elite when we talked about our all-area team, and I really do feel this is a truly elite class of players that we were able to pick this year.
We talk about the all-area basketball team probably starting in December. We're throwing out Player of the Year candidates and first-team all-area players. We kind of talk about that all season long. Tell me about these five guys. How would you like to be, or how would Coach Deutsch like to coach these five guys that you've selected as your all-area team? And what kind of a challenge would that present other teams that would face that team?
Oh, geez. Well, I mean, the first thing I kind of think about is it would definitely be a defense-oriented team. And all five of these guys, and we'll throw Noah Carter into this too, all six of these guys who are getting sort of pulled out here, they can play stellar defense. I already mentioned that Lucas Duax was one of the top steal guys in the whole conference and was among state leaders. We also got Riley LeGrand, who is another terrific point guard defender. All these guys, Hunter Machi and Will Schwartz, they're all sort of long, athletic, wing-type players who can really create matchup problems. And I think Kurt Deutsch, obviously he already coached Lucas, but I think Kurt Deutsch would absolutely be thrilled to see the skill set that he has with these five players and Noah Carter, our Player of the Year.
Well, that should pretty much do it for our winter season. That wraps everything up for us. We'll get moving into the spring season if it ever stops raining here. But this is another episode of Telegraph Herald More Than the Score, presented by Dubuque Auto Plaza. I'm Jim Leitner, the Telegraph Herald sports writer. This is Brenden West, and we will see you next time.